Hey Future Twig, past Twig here once again, and today we have something a little bit different for everybody. I actually got a wonderful comment by Yu-Gi-Oh! Nerd22 on a previous video, one about a card called Spark Trooper. We'll show you that here in a second. And what was originally just going to be a quick response in the comments to him morphed into something else, as over the past couple days I've kind of been mulling over his comment, the very solid points that he made concerning Spark Trooper and the issues you have with that card. And what I originally was just going to show like a possible synergy turned into an entire pseudo deck tech, like an entire concept for a deck. So I'm just going to get right into it and let's just show you what we got. First off, just as a quick reminder for those who may not have already watched the video, if you haven't, it'll be in the description below. 1 white, 2 red, 1 colorless, Spark Trooper. Trample lifelink haste. At the beginning of your end step, sacrifice Spark Trooper, and it's a 6/1. So lots of power, lots of burst damage, but then it immediately dies at the end of your turn, and naturally that's kind of like a lot of power for one turn, one attack, but then it disappears. So there's a lot of downsides, and there are some other downsides we'll get into in just a second. But first, let's talk about Yu-Gi-Oh! Nerd22's comment, which was that he thinks the card has some potential, but he thinks that it's in the wrong colors. In particular, he mentions that commanders like Henzi or Zaitora, excellent choices by the way, would make this card very worthwhile, but you have just not as many options with that kind of Jun-style sacrifice effect in red and white. And yeah, as he mentions, it's basically a big swing target or a great fling target, but of course there's already tons of other cards that red has that can do that. And he's too expensive to be a Sun Titan target. And so, yeah, he just doesn't think he's very good, too shallow and narrow to be played for now. First off, just talking about what he directly mentioned, I agree that a lot of white and red synergies, especially with bringing creatures back from the graveyard, revolve around mana cost or mana value 3 or less, which is not going to work because Spark Trooper is CMC 4, which kind of sucks, Sun Titan being the example that Yu-Gi-Oh! Nerd brought up. Additionally, you have stuff like Alicia, who can bring back creatures as well. However, this is the other side of the thing, which is that white likes small creatures, so creatures with power 2 or less traditionally. And with 6 power, obviously Spark Trooper isn't going to work, so we've got a lot of issues. So if all of these issues take into account, now what? What do we do with Spark Trooper? He's kind of like in this weird thing where he's powerful, but he's not powerful enough to justify putting him in on raw power alone, and he doesn't quite synergize with a lot of other effects in red and white, so what do we do? First off, we grab his friends, so you can grab cards like Ball Lightning, which is a very similar effect. You can grab big old beaters like a Chroma Angel of Fury, for example, and there's some very big spells in red and white. And you can grab additional creatures like Impetuous Devils, which is kind of like a Spark Trooper, doing very similar things, but it can force creatures to block, so it can kind of work as like pseudo-removal for your opponent's commander or creatures. However, with creatures, you need a plan, and the plan I kind of came up with was a very traditional plan called Warstorm Surge. And basically what Warstorm Surge is it's a 5 colorless, 1 red enchantment, which reads, whenever a creature enters the battlefield under my control, it deals damage equal to its power to any target. And the critical part about this is the creature itself, deals the damage. And you've got to remember, Spark Trooper is a lifelink creature, which means any damage that it deals to something else is gained to you as life. So this is actually quite powerful, because oftentimes red is very, especially if a group slug deck like this would be with a lot of high power creatures, you tend to start losing life a lot yourself. So having a way to recoup that life is actually very important, and Spark Trooper allows us to do that. Moving on, of course, with other stuff, you have cards like Mirror March. This is a bit more than the $1 I usually set for myself, but I thought I would include as well, and there's of course other effects as well that can do something similar, where you can create tokens of that creature whenever it enters the battlefield. And basically then you can have a huge cascade effect with Warstorm Surge that have a lot of damage get dealt very rapidly. Finally, you have amazing cards like Pandemonium. This is like Lord Warstorm Surge, but it's a mana cheaper, and it affects everybody. But, of course, if you're building your deck around effects like Pandemonium, you can take more advantage than others, and it can create a huge group slug environment where you're just dealing out a lot of damage all over the place. Obviously a double-edged sword, but it's a fairly powerful effect, so I wanted to include it in this. Crazy part is that if you're building around this Power Matters deck and like trying to basically get the most value out of creatures in one turn, there's actually cards that kind of work with that, like Combat Celebrant, one of the only effects that gives you an additional combat step that's less than $1 to my knowledge. Most of these cards usually range in the $10 to $12 range, so having one of them that's only 65 cents and is a high power creature that kind of works with the rest of our deck plan, really solid. But with all of these ideas and cards that I've thrown out with you, what about the commander? Is there a commander out there that would be able to utilize and make these cards kind of work well and synergize so that we can get the most value out of our Spark Trooper? And I actually did find one that I thought was pretty powerful. There's a bunch of different directions you can go. Naya decks, red, green, and white, have some pretty powerful effects. But today I thought I would talk to you about Arthur Marigold Knight, and he is Jeskai, so white, red, blue, 2 colorless, 4/5 with haster. And whenever Arthur Marigold Knight attacks, whenever Arthur Marigold Knight and at least one other creature attacks, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may put a creature card from among them onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Return that creature to its owner's hands at end of combat. So there's a ton of stuff going on with a commander like this. First off, he's a haster, so he ties into the whole Spark Trooper hasting beat him down style strategy. He wants to attack, and you have a lot of other creatures like Spark Trooper that are also able to come down on one turn and attack with him to help trigger his effect. And what's really cool is that one of those last lines there about returning that creature to your owner's hand at end of combat. What's really powerful about this is because of the way it works, Spark Trooper and all of the cards like him, like Ball Lightning, are sacrificed at the end of your turn. But at the end of combat, they're still on the field actively in play. So you can actually bounce them back to your hand and then recast them, getting repeated value from stuff like Spark Trooper. And once you have Warstorm Surge and other cards down, you can get repeated value from those high power cards. Additionally, the fact that it returns to your hand means you can stack your deck, because Arthur has blue in his thing, and blue has a lot of cards like Brainstorm here, where you can basically draw cards and then put several cards from your hand back on top of your library to guarantee that on the top 6 cards of your library, you have a creature that will enter the battlefield tapped and attacking when he attacks. Going on, of course, there's also discounted cards like Dream Cache. This is kind of like Brainstorm. It's a bit more expansive, but it allows you to kind of search your deck and have additional Brainstorm effects to make sure you always have creatures on top of your library. And then, of course, just going on again, we have cards like Survivor of the Unseen, which is a creature that you can play out. And while you do have to pay that cumulative upkeep cost, you can always have this constant tapping ability to draw cards and put cards on top of your library. Last but not least, shout out to a fallen soldier. This is Penance. When I first found this card back when I built one of my first decks ever, it was a Tamishi Reality Architect deck. This card was like a 30-cent card. Loved it. It was such a fun include in that deck. However, as it has only been printed once and people have kind of garnered to how powerful this effect is, it is now a $5 card. And the reason for that is because at instant speed, you can choose a card from your hand, put it on top of your library, and if that wasn't already powerful enough, you can prevent all damage from a black or red source, which is fantastic. But if you had some extra budget and you were willing to include a kind of old, kind of janky card, Penance would be a solid include in this deck, because you could put any creature you wanted on top of your library at instant speed from your hand, and that would, once Arthur's attack trigger goes on the stack. And once I got into this idea of Arthur and, like this creature cycling from, the battlefield back to your hand, then back to your library, then back to the battlefield, ideas just kept flowing, because there's cards like Leashling, which is a deck card I've always wanted to use. I still don't think he's the most powerful effect, because the way he has to bounce himself could be useful, but maybe is not the best card for this deck, but thought I would include him. Moving, of course, you also have cards like Arbiter of the Ideal, which is a massive card that whenever it becomes untapped, it reveal the top card of your library. If it's an artifact, creature, or land card, you can put it onto the battlefield with a manifestation counter on it, and it becomes a permanent. It becomes an enchantment in addition to its other type. So this can help ramp you a little bit. It can help serve as another way to get creatures down and out onto the battlefield, and it's just a big beater by itself. So there's some awesome synergies you can have with Arthur there. And last but not least, you have Outlaw's Merriment. This is a 4-mana enchantment. Recall that Arthur's a 5-mana creature, so you can slap this down the turn before. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you create a random creature, and note that all 3 of the types of creatures it creates have various effects that can be useful, will trigger Warstorm Surge, and perhaps most importantly, they all have haste. So basically what that means is you slap this down turn 4, slap Arthur down turn 5, and Arthur will automatically, guaranteed, even if the other creatures have been cleared, have a creature that he can attack with hasted immediately. And that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for the comment, Yu-Gi-Oh! Nerd 22. Hopefully this helped answer, show some possibilities for Spark Trooper. I actually think it's a very neat deck concept, and with some refinement could become quite powerful, or at the very least quite fun in a casual commander setting. And otherwise, yeah, thank you very much for tuning in. Have a great day, and take care.